Hi guys, what is up? Welcome back to my channel, GlamBySam. If you're new here, don't forget to click subscribe if you want new beauty videos every Tuesday, Thursday and Sunday. And if you are already a subscriber, then of course, hi, welcome back. So glad you're watching again. So for today's video, I have the eyeshadow palette tag. I asked you guys on Instagram if you wanted to see this eyeshadow palette tag because I saw some other YouTubers doing it and it looked really fun, because if you know me, you know that I love eyeshadow palettes and they make me so happy. So I thought, what better video than this eyeshadow palette tag, so I get to talk about eyeshadow palettes for about 10 minutes. So I'm actually not entirely sure who the creator of this tag was, but I will look it up and I will put the name in the description box, as well as all the questions in case you want to do this tag as well. But I think without further ado, let's get started and talk about the eyeshadow palettes. So the first question was a palette that represents me in terms of the Colorstory. And for this was pretty easy. I decided to go with my Natasha Denona Love palette, and the reason why I decided to go for this palette is because if you know me, you know that I love wearing pink toned eyeshadow. I love these colors so much, and if you take a look at this palette, they're just all really gorgeous pink tones, but there's also some like reds and even some purples. So I think in general these are all colors that I really enjoy wearing, and that is why I of course had to go with this one. I don't know what it is about pink eyeshadow looks, but I just always love doing pink eyeshadow looks. Right now I'm actually wearing my Naked Honey palette, which I recently got, and this is like a totally different look for me, but I also really like this more yellow toned look. But for the most part, pink eyeshadows are really me. So that is why I decided to go with my Natasha Denona Love palette. Then next we have a palette that represents me in terms of the packaging. And this was actually pretty difficult because I really love the packaging of the majority of my palettes, but I ended up going with this one, which is from Colourpop, and this is the Colourpop Blush Crush palette. And I was doubting to put this into the Colorstory that represents me, but in terms of the packaging, I think this is more me than the Natasha Denona one, because this has a gorgeous floral design on here. And I just think this packaging is stunning. I think this is one of my favorite packaging in terms of the eyeshadows in my collection. And I just really love this palette. And if you know me, you know that I love pink and florals. So of course I had to go with my Colourpop Blush Crush palette. Then the next question was if I would pick an eyeshadow palette that represents summer. And this one was also fairly easy in my opinion. I immediately thought of this new palette, which is the Colourpop and Malibu Barbie palette. I did a video on this, and this packaging, first of all, just screams summer, but the Colorstory is just so summery too. This is what it looks like. As you can see, there's gorgeous pops of colors in here, but there's also these really pretty more like peachy tones and then some yellows. So overall, I just really love this palette, and I think this palette just screams summer. I cannot wait to wear this a lot during the summertime. I think this is one of Colourpop's most exciting palettes actually. So this was fairly easy for me to put this in a category, palettes that represent summer, because I don't have a lot of palette with like these bright pops of colors, and I think this is really pretty palette. So again, that is the Colourpop Malibu Barbie palette, and I believe this is also still available on Colourpop's website. I will of course link all the palettes that are still available to buy in the description box in case you're interested in picking any of these up. Then the next question is if I would pick a palette that represents happy, and this was actually pretty difficult because pretty much all my eyeshadow palettes make me happy. So this was a difficult decision, but I ended up choosing this one, and this is the Too Faced Gingerbread Spice palette. And let me show you what the inside looks like, because this is truly a stunning palette. It's a little hard to show with my studio light right there, but the reason why I decided to choose this gingerbread palette is actually because of the memory that I have attached to this palette. So this palette actually launched, I believe, in like the winter of 2018, and I saw this in New York, and I didn't get this because I wasn't that much into eyeshadow palettes the way I am now, but I thought it was a pretty palette. But then like a couple months later, I really regretted not picking this up. I saw people doing looks with this and it just looks so cute. So I was really sad that it wasn't available anymore because it was a limited edition release for the holidays. But then I actually went to England in the summer, and right before I went, like Too Faced announced that they were doing their like Christmas in July thing, where they were bringing back the gingerbread spice palette. And I actually traveled to Oxford, and Oxford happened to have a Too Faced store. So I went into the store, I saw this palette, and I still didn't get it because I don't know, it was just expensive. I didn't know if I really wanted to spend that much money on an eyeshadow palette because it wasn't like on sale or anything. And then my boyfriend actually convinced me to get this palette because otherwise I would regret it. So I got this palette, and then I ended up getting this for my birthday. So now I'm just really happy that I did decide to pick up this palette because not only is it a gorgeous palette in terms of the color story, I just also have a lovely memory attached to this of my trip to England. Then the next question is the question if I had to pick an eyeshadow palette that represents the grungy in me. And first of all, let me say I'm not a grungy person at all. I don't think I have like a grungy side in me. I'm just not that person. But I decided to take a look at my palettes and see what palette would be the most grungy for my collection. And I was doubting between the Club Nebula palette and this one. And I ended up going with this one, which is the Grandeur palette, because this is a really different color story and packaging than I would usually buy. As you can see, it's just a lot more dark. It has these like darker floral design on here. And the color story itself is a lot darker too than I would usually buy. But for some reason, I was so attracted to this palette when it was released. I thought it was beautiful, so I bought this palette, and it is one of my favorite palettes for creating more like dark looks. So whenever I want to do more like a nighttime look or like just a different type of look than the everyday pink look I like to do, then I love reaching for this ColourPop Grandeur palette. Then the next question was if I had to pick a palette that represents the girly in me. And I'm a really girly person, so this wasn't like too difficult. I actually decided to go with this Charlotte Tilbury Pillow Talk palette. So this is the Pillow Talk Instant Eye palette, and this is a gorgeous, gorgeous palette. It's a little hard to show because this is all shiny and everything, but I hope you can see it like this. This is just a gorgeous pink toned eyeshadow palette, but there's also some like beautiful warm tones in here. So whenever I want to do like a girly pink look, I usually reach for this one because it is so pretty. I love the formula of this palette, and it is so easy to create a gorgeous cohesive look with this palette. That is the Pillow Talk palette. Then the next question was if I had to pick a palette that represents fun, and for this I decided to go with this one, and this is the Kylie Cosmetics Green palette. So the first reason why I chose this, because of course this is a Christmas themed palette and I just love Christmas, so that is the reason why this palette is fun. But the second reason is that it is the Grinch, which I think this was such a fun collab. And lastly, I think the color story is just really fun. I know a lot of people were disappointed by this palette, that there were like not enough greens in here. And while I do understand why people are saying that because this is a Grinch collab, I know I wouldn't wear bright greens on an everyday basis. So for me, this color story is much more wearable. So I really like this color story, and I just think this palette is so fun because I love to play with green eyeshadow every now and then. But when you open this palette up, there's this Grinch face right here, and this palette just screams Christmas. So that is why I had to pick this palette up, and I think this is one of the more fun palettes in my collection in terms of like the design and collab and everything. And the last question was if I had to choose an eyeshadow palette in my collection that represents inspiration, and for that I went with this Huda Beauty Mercury Retrograde palette. And the reason why I picked this one is the color story is just so fun. So when you open it up, this is what it looks like. There's just this gorgeous like pastel color story, and I just love that there's blues, there's purples, there's pinks, there's peaches. There's just so many different looks you can make with this palette, and that is why this palette really inspires me to create looks. I used to use this a lot, so now I don't use it as much, but I still really enjoy using this palette, and every time I create a look with this, I just immediately know what type of look I want to do, and it always turns out beautiful. This shimmer shade right here is so gorgeous, and I just highly recommend this palette because it is so beautiful, and it's one of of the more like exciting palettes in my collection in terms of inspiration I get from this. Okay guys, and this was it for the eyeshadow palette collection tag. I really hope you guys enjoyed watching this and find it interesting to see which palettes I put in each category. I would love to hear you guys' answers on these questions, so feel free to leave your answers to these questions. I would love to know what you guys would put in each category. So if you did enjoy this video, then I would absolutely love it if you gave it a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell if you don't want to miss any of my videos. All of these things would help me so much with my channel and I'd really appreciate it. But with that said, I want to thank you guys all so much for watching. I really hope you have an amazing day and I really hope to see you in my next video. Bye!